Good evening. Thanks for coming out on this windy but wonderful summer night where everybody should be doing something else. But as he said, my name is Gregor Dotzauer. I'm the literary editor of Der Tagesspiegel in Berlin, and it's my pleasure to introduce two wonderful young writers to you. Fiona Maazel in the middle and Karen Russell to your right.
The English Theatre Berlin is located in Berlin's multicultural center, Kreuzberg. The US Embassy has a long-standing and fruitful partnership with the theatre, using it as one of the main locations for visiting authors as part of the English Literature Series.
Das English Theatre macht ja Lesungen wie diese heute Abend schon seit einigen Jahren.
For several years now, the English Theatre has been organizing readings like tonight's. It's great to be working with the American Embassy again and continuing the literature series. We hope this will continue in the future. We also occasionally have readings of detective novels, so that one can really say that this has become a tradition in the English theatre.
Lesereien im englischen Theater schon durchaus eine Tradition haben.
As Fiona invited Karen to share her reading, this is not a pairing of chance, it's a pairing of choice. They have admired each other for quite some years now, and the fact that both of them are on fellowships in Germany, like you just heard, allows us to find out what connects them both in terms of literary style and taste, apart from the fact that they both belong to the 5 under 35 the National Book Foundation annually selects for their presentations. Fiona had this in 2008 and Karen in 2009, no, just the other way around. And both were writers in residence at Bard College. So let's start with Fiona, which is why I want to ask Karen first. She calls Wake Up Lonely, let me quote, a funhouse hall of mirrors whose dark and hilarious distortions reveal some almost unbearable truths about what it means to be lonely in America today. What are these unbearable truths?
I know, my goodness. I'm sorry, is this,
It's working.
I loved Fiona's new novel. I got the great pleasure of being an early reader for it. And I think one of the ways that Fiona uses humor in the book to incredible effect is to never make her characters themselves jokes, but always to spade up, I call it unbearable, but I think just the way that people are living these incredibly partitioned lives in America right now. And the kind of this terrible disjuncture between commercial reality, you know, this sort of the myth, you mentioned the happily married couple, right? So there's this sort of glossy cartoon kind of a really impoverished dream of what happiness is that involves, I don't know, this myth of just sexual bliss around the clock, SUV, mega mansion, you know, McFranchise. There's sort of these dreams that are sort of dictated by corporations, and then the really private way that people suffer in her book. So there's a character who has this terrible illness, and how sort of impossibly private that is, and how that pain is accentuated by this sort of the commercial reality, you know, that's sort of streaming live 24/7.
We'll hear about that in a moment, but do you really think there's a substantial, maybe even empirically measurable rise of loneliness in Western societies, or does this loneliness rather consist in hopes and expectations no contemporary life can satisfy anymore?
No, I think that loneliness is really on the rise. Everybody hear me? Are we on? Yes?
No, I don't think so. Do you want to take?
Oh, all right. No, we're good. No, I think that loneliness is on the rise in Western culture, or at least we're more aware of it, primarily because social networking has brought people together, you know, quote unquote, in such a way as to make paramount just how unbelievably bifurcated and fractured people's lives are. Most people now communicate almost exclusively via text and email. And if you look at the stats, I did a lot of research for the novel, and the stats were unbelievably depressing. You know, every single form of social and civic engagement in the country has fallen off by something like 60% in the last 5 years. We used to have bowling leagues, picnic leagues, people used to do stuff together, go to church, go hiking, and now people are living solitary lives. Of course, there's a big distinction to be made between being solitary and being lonely. solitude is quite nice. Loneliness is quite devastating.
Can we do anything about this loneliness?
Well, it depends who you ask, really. I mean, the mandate for this cult in the novel is that the cult should kind of try to assault and perhaps surmount loneliness in America by having people go on speed dates and confess to each other at a very high level. There are all these kind of forced ways of getting people to interact by way of accosting loneliness. But no, I mean, there's this kind of fundamental tension. You know, we're born alone, we die alone. This is, you know, the existential condition of the human spirit. And is there any way to ever surmount that? I mean, I'm certainly not the first author to tackle this problem. Do I think it's soluble? I don't know, and I'm not even sure that that's the appropriate question. And that's what the novel is kind of about. Is that really what we want to be spending all of our time on? Or is it just one of those questions that you just sort of forget about, and in the meantime you have that immovable fact of the feelings that you have for the people around you?
In my introduction, I mentioned David Foster Wallace, who with The Pale King left as a whole novel on boredom. Isn't loneliness just the flip side of boredom? And isn't boredom again a symptom of the information overload in a way, at least in parts? Social media's information overload at the same time.
I don't know. I mean, loneliness doesn't have to be an evacuation of your inner life. I mean, you don't have to be dismissed of all creativity in order to feel lonely, whereas boredom seems like anathema, you know, to all the creative instinct. They are both sweeping, rather deadening American preoccupations. But The Pale King had these amazing, I don't know how many people have read it, but you know, it had these amazing set pieces that were the opposite of boring. I mean, you know, this man can dwell on boredom in such a way that boredom seems like the most inspiriting, enlivening experience, you know, one can have. And loneliness can certainly feel that way. It can feel energetic, especially if your loneliness trucks with a high degree of despair. Despair always being potentially comic and invigorating.